welcome to the Untitled Chapter training session. So what we're going to do today is we're going to shrink wrap this training structure. Okay? We're going to do the roof and then we're going to shrink wrap the sides. First of all, we have the heat gun. This is the most, the key tool that we use for shrink wrapping operations. It's quite a simple tool. Obviously we've got inside here, we've got the components of the gun. The key components really, we've got a spark generator, which is inside the gun. When you squeeze the trigger, that's what's going to fire the spark plug at the front. What also happens when you squeeze the trigger, gas flows in here through a gas valve, comes around the gun, is injected through here, down the barrel, mixes with air, and obviously it's ignited here at the exhaust section of the gun. Obviously the gun has a plastic housing. Now this is a robust housing, but before you use it, each time it's always worth giving the gun a look over, make sure there's no cracks or damage to the tool. The other sort of important things to check before you start, it's important to keep the gun as clean as possible. Obviously here we've got an area where the gas is being injected out. If this injector here gets dirty, that can affect the performance and the output of the gun, can affect the quality of the flame. So it's always worth, when the gun's not in use, making sure it's stored away properly. So the operation of the gun here, you've got the handle at the front. As I say, when we squeeze the trigger, that allows the gas to flow into the gun. When you complete the squeeze of the trigger, the electrical charge is sent to the spark plug. That creates a spark, and that's how the gas is ignited. It's important that when you're using the gun, that this area here is kept clear, because if that is covered perhaps by clothing or something like that when you're using it, then you're going to really change the amount of air that's allowed into the gun. You're going to end up burning pretty much just gas, and you're going to end up with a big sort of yellow flame, and it's not going to work very well. Okay. So before we use the gun, it's always worth obviously bearing in mind a couple of maintenance issues. As I mentioned, the gas valve here, that does need occasional lubrication. And for that, we use this sort of very light mineral oil. And all you need to do is, perhaps every month or so, just put a couple of drops of oil at the bottom of the gun. Okay. And then when we fire, we squeeze the trigger and let some gas through, that oil will come through into this gas valve and just make sure that stays nice and lubricated. If the gas valve sticks, the main symptom of that is that when you release the trigger, instead of the gun going off, as it should do immediately, gas will keep on flowing. So obviously that's a situation that we don't want, because obviously it's a key safety feature that when we release the trigger, the flame stops. Okay. The thing I need to show you obviously is the hose. These are 8 metres long. You'll notice there's a date printed on the hose somewhere. Now that date is actually the date of manufacture. So as here it says, you see it's 2012 on there, so this is a hose that's been made this year. There isn't actually a set sort of lifespan for the hose, but obviously this is a consumable part, and over time it will degrade and need replacing. Before you use the hose every time, it's always worth looking over it, making sure there's no nicks or holes in the hose. Okay. Again, the hoses are, should give, quite a few years of use under normal circumstances. Two areas to watch out for on the hose really are these end sections where the hose connects to the gun and to the cylinder. It's important that they can get bent over like this, perhaps in use. And so it's always worth checking these parts to make sure that these are all still well fitted. Okay. Finally, obviously you have the regulator. This obviously controls the flow of gas to the heat gun. Big red button on here is an anti-flashback device, which basically means if the hose is cut and the gas starts to flow through this regulator uncontrollably, then this part here will cut the gas off and mean that the gun stays safe. PPE is essential for shrink wrapping operations. Essential items are long sleeve clothing, so you don't have your arms exposed in case you risk of getting burned. In addition, obviously we wear safety gauntlets when we're using the hot air gun. Obviously that provides us with an additional layer of protection. In addition to the long sleeves and the safety gloves, safety glasses are advisable in some scenarios when you're shrink wrapping. In particular, if you're working in confined areas, there is a danger that the hot air can come back and hit you in the face, particularly if you're working in corners. And in those sorts of scenarios, then some form of eye protection is also advisable. There's two types of knives that we use on the shrink wrapping. We've got the safety knife, which is useful when you're working against something that you don't want to get cut. So typically, really, we use the safety knife when we're shrink wrapping sort of boats and industrial objects where we don't want to damage what we're covering. The safety knife is also useful when you just need to cut through a single layer of tough coat film. The Stanley knife obviously is useful when you need to cut plastic from the roll, or when you've got multiple layers of shrink wrap that you need to cut through, then you're going to need to use a Stanley knife. Obviously we recommend that you use one with a retractable blade, and ideally some kind of holster to keep it nice and safe.